Great, thanks Chase. Thanks for everyone calling in. So I'm going to talk a little about the HiWish HiRISE suggestion portal to get your images of Mars acquired. I'm a team member on HiRISE, and so this was actually a presentation I had put together for LPSC. So I'm really glad we're here to go through it. So a little background on HiRISE. It's been proclaimed the people's camera because we have such a rapid cadence for releasing images on every month. You can see our HiRISE website, which is the official PDS node, but you can also get those at the geoscience node. Also, we have DTMs released on a monthly basis as well. Targets are entered into the HiRISE target database primarily through HiWish, and both from team members and the public, which includes school children, scientific colleagues, and anyone who wants an account, quite honestly. We have additional updates on the HiRISE mission, including its status, its health, long-term prospects. That's still pretty relevant from the Alfred McEwen in 2019, so you can see that. But I'll just add that we are acquiring images now, even in the midst of the pandemic, and have been hampered a little bit by DSN issues, but we're still getting quite a bit of data. So here's a map of all the suggestions that we've got across Mars. And so if you visualize a HiRISE image map where we actually have data, it would be similar. There has been almost 10,000 registered accounts into HiWish. We've got something like 24,000 targets suggested, and of those, 10,000 were public, and they had been retired, meaning we've actually gotten images. And it varies, but on a quarterly basis, we have about something like 700 around there of new suggestions entered into the database. So a little about time-independent observation planning. So this is I'll talk a little about time-dependent observation planning in several slides, but primarily this is what this talks about is entering your regions of interest or your targets into HiWish. You can see the website there, which you can get from our main website, but there's a link there as well where you'll want to create an account, and you'll want to start thinking about science themes that we've got and where your target belongs. So for example, if you had a science paper recently that you had a variety of images that were in good areas and you highlighted those, but there was this one area that you really wanted to follow up on, this is a place to get that suggestion into our database. And once it's in the database, it's more likely to get acquired of that particular ground stamp on Mars. And once those suggestions are in the database, we've got a number of science theme leads that will prioritize those suggestions, and those will, along with other constraints, will dictate whether those suggestions get acquired. So the science themes you can see listed, we've got just off the top, aeolian impact processes, polar geology, tectonics, future and current landing sites is all themes, but we've got more than that. You'll see that at the main website, and you can there's quite a bit of detail for all of these, but we've got a summary within the HiWish suggestion portal, and this is what this screen grab shows that. And you'll want to select your primary science theme once you're in the HiWish portal, and selecting a secondary theme, which is less important, but These all have contact persons as well, which is generally the science theme lead, and they can give you some answers. Once you've entered into HiWish, you've registered, you want to create a new suggestion, you'll see something like this, which will allow you to fill out all this information that I'll go into some detail. You'll have the opportunity to zoom in. You'll be initially at a global view, but you can zoom in to quite fine scales, and you can see there's prior HiRISE images there, and including some suggestions that haven't been acquired, but you'll zoom into this interactive map, and then you can pan around, find that location. Double clicking will get your initial target placement, and you'll see a kind of an average size image suggestion rectangle in region of interest in the on the map. And then you're once you select it, after you've double clicked it, you can kind of nudge it to the in any direction, shift its location. There's also other data footprints that we can display with HiWish, and be helpful. Especially if you want to look at other HiRISE images, you can just click on those images, and that'll launch our website. But we also have links to CTX and CRISM, a few other data sets that will let you take a look at those at the ASU's Mars Image Explorer, and that might be a good way to locate a particular geologic feature that you want to image within the CTX, and then you can kind of work between those two. Oh, I meant to have this slide a little earlier. I'm sorry about that. But this is the initial login screen where you've logged in, and you would create a new suggestion. But you can also list your prior suggestions. You can view suggestions that are already in the database, and a few other options. But then you'll want to go into the new suggestion scene and be able to select a location, and then you'll want to select a title for your suggestion and your eventual image. We suggest a region and some sort of geology. Between those two, you might want to be a little more specific or a little more general. Within the science rationale, this is one of the more important things to think about when you're filling out your suggestion. And I'll give some examples. You'll want to tell the HiRISE team why this suggestion should get acquired, and why it'll be helpful for Mars science in general, or your particular investigation. We'll have a special notes panel that will, it kind of depends on the level of detail that you have, how finely tuned you want that image. For example, if you only want the highest resolution, you'll want to note that here. If you're worried about the image getting cut off because it's a big area, you want to specify that there's a particular area that's more critical in that region of interest, and I can give some examples on that. And then you'll want to set an internal priority. This is a priority that you may have a dozen targets that you're going to enter. You'll want to kind of give them a relative rank. So, and that'll give the science theme lead some impression while they're going through and looking at your suggestions in terms of the team prioritization. That'll be helpful to know that you really, this is a 5, and your other targets would be really helpful to get, but they're not as critical as this 5. Some examples on the science rationale. This is a very general science rationale, which just says the objective is to examine this lava flow. There's complex structures on the edges compared to the center. And this scene can be found in this particular CTX image. That's a pretty reasonable approach, and it ended up quite nicely. That was a suggestion that was prioritized. It went into our database, and we acquired this image, and it's a really nice public suggestion. Now, on the other hand, you could put in a lot of detail. This one, for example, had prior images that were intriguing, and the suggester had a hypothesis that a stereo pair at this location would help better determine how small ancient impact craters, how big they are, and if that had any implications on the early atmosphere when that suggester thought that those craters were forming. Now, the special notes, again, this tells you the HiRISE uplink specialist to know if there needs to be some adjustment, or if it's just really critical to get the entire image at the highest resolution. You'll want to mention that. But here I'm saying cover the full target at 25 centimeter per pixel. I don't want 50 centimeter per pixel. It's better that you cut off the bottom quarter or whatever if you have data volume constraints. So that's something we do. Here, Colin is interested in frost that's on the edges of these craters that forms during the colder seasons, and is expected to have some role in the gully formation, even though that they're in the shadows. He's telling the planner, go ahead and image here. Frost will be able to be imaged even though it's in low light conditions. So as you move down into the HiWish panel, there'll be advanced options that you can toggle on. This has to do with requesting stereo and higher resolution and seasonal. These are all things that you may want to do. Stereo targets are common. You'll want to toggle that on, and will automatically create anaglyphs if that stereo pair is acquired. There's also this new option that we've been making available to the public this year, which allows prior images that were not originally stereo. You can now do stereo completion suggestions for those prior images. So if you had an image that you had in a science investigation, you want a stereo, you want to make a DTM of it, that can work really nicely. We'll want to wait till there's good lighting conditions, but sometimes that ends up being faster than getting a whole new stereo pair. But that generally doesn't work for example, high latitude sites where there's large changes in lighting conditions or frost. Sand dunes may not be the best target for those kind of stereo completions, but I use this option quite often on what I presume is static geology. Now, the seasonal imaging is if you have a particular season you want to image. A lot of suggestions just go in as 0 to 360, and our own planning process will weed out images that just are in a really bad season with high phase angle. But you may want to limit that. There's also repeat targeting for seasonal processes like gullies or RSL. You can select the number of observations and constrain those further by the season and just by checking that box, and that'll make a nice even seasonal constraints. So that's, once you've entered all those suggestions into our database, we've got the time time-dependent observation planning. So MRO is on a 2-week planning cycle I'm sorry, 2-week cycles where we acquire data from all the instruments nominally. And so we have to start planning that 3 weeks ahead of time. And in that, during that process, we've got a science team member working with one of our uplink specialists to plan that entire 2 weeks. And we've got a number of constraints that may limit particular suggestions. What's visible, there's spacecraft keep out zones. We've got data volume that fluctuates throughout the Mars year. And then we've got instrument temperature constraints. And then we're also coordinating with the other MRO instruments. And so we just can't image all the time everywhere. But the prioritization will go according to that science team member's preference, but we generally try to get images from all the science themes. And so we were talking about the HiWish submission, and that will put us into the database, your suggestion in the database, which will get prioritized relatively quickly. And then we go into that time-dependent cycle planning. For the 2 weeks of image acquisition, and then we've got about a little less than a week of downlink of image processing and validation, putting geometry into the images, and then we will release within a month. You can actually, if that image is getting planned and it's been acquired, but we're just waiting for that PDS release the next month, you'll actually see that in your HiWish prior suggestions. You'll see the image ID. It just may not be available for a few weeks. There's many reasons why you may not be able to get a particular suggestion acquired. A lot of places are competitive. If you're trying to get a North Polar image, that's right now is a really bad time because we're going into the southern spring, and it's going to be till 2021 before you're going to get even an early season image. Stereos require longer, usually require longer wait times. We can't normally get those in a given single cycle, but and then seasonal constraints, or you just didn't provide enough image and enough information in the suggestion justification. Some of the more competitive sites or locations, you can imagine they're where we have surface assets in Gale, along where InSight is, Meridiani, ExoMars, but also the upcoming Mars 2020 mission in Sirius Major. Those are all very popular areas, along with Valles Marineris. So those are tricky areas to get, but we encourage you to put your suggestions in and justify them well. Just some final links and resources where you can get access to digital terrain models, a database for past suggestions, more information on the science theme, and then there's a little more detail in the LPSC abstract we put out earlier this year, including the e-poster, which is just basically a different version of this presentation. So, and with that, I think I'm happy to answer any questions.